where this, sorry, not 1798, it's the transition between the plowing and the early rain, which Sister White is marking here, coming up as 1798, so that gives us the waymark for our anchor. And we began reconstructing this line a little bit, and we talked about the end, and we said that this process will be concluded when the solution finishes, I guess, if that's the best way to say it. You have the problem of the fallow field, and the problem here that we identified was the problem of the first beast, which is persecution and captivity. And the contrast to that, or the solution to that, is to do the opposite, which is to provide freedom. Freedom from persecution and freedom from captivity. And so this is from the beginning of the plowing all the way through till the time of harvest, the solution will be carried out of freedom, I guess, if you can say that succinctly. And it's going to culminate at the Sunday Law. We know this from other lines of truth, that this is where the United States is going to come to its end as a republic. And the republic side of the United States is the lifespan of freedom, I guess, freedom in this capacity. And after this point, it's going to become an empire or a dictatorship. You know, we could characterize it in a couple different ways. So we have a problem solution, and that's what we've been talking about. And so if we go back to our Great Controversy quote, we are looking at Great Controversy 1888, 440 and 441. We read 440 in the last presentation. We started reading 441, so we're going to finish that now. Okay. The Christian exiles, I'll start over. And he had 2 horns like a lamb. The lamb-like horns indicate youth, innocence, and gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States when presented to the prophet as coming up as a plant in 1798. The Christian exiles who first fled to America sought asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance. So she's going to identify the problem for us and put it in different words. Royal oppression and priestly intolerance. And they determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty. The Declaration of Independence sets forth the great truth that all men are created equal and endowed with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Constitution guarantees to the people the right of self-government, providing that representatives elected by the popular vote shall enact and administer the laws. Freedom of religious faith was also granted, every man permitted to worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. Republicanism and Protestantism became the fundamental principles of the nation. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity. So let's talk about that. So I just want to do this quickly, hopefully, so we can move forward. What time did we start? 3:45, roughly? 3:50. 3:50. Okay, 3:50. So we had what were the problems she listed? There's 2 problems.
Royal oppression and priestly intolerance.
Royal oppression and priestly intolerance. Okay, so this is the problem here, the 2 problems. And she's going to give the solution to those problems in several different ways. So the first thing she says, in contrast, she says, asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance, and they're determined to establish a government upon the broad foundations of civil and religious liberty. So problem, solution. Problem is royal oppression. We're going to give civil liberty. And there was also, what did it say, religious liberty. So this is the first way she's going to describe let's do it this way. Yeah. This is the first way she's going to describe the answer or the solution to the problem. The next one she mentions is what? If anyone has it in front of them. What are the next 2? You're missing one. There's one in between there. The next one is self-government. 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 And what was the contrast to it? Self-government and
Provided representatives elected by the vote.
freedom of religious faith. So I'll just say freedom of religion. Freedom of religion. Okay, so you have. So first she says, so royal oppression and priestly intolerance are the problem. The solution is civil liberty and religious liberty. And she's going to say it another way. It's self-government and religious freedom of religion. And what's the last one, Sister Elaine? You already said it.
Republicanism and
Republicanism and Protestantism. So what is this? What has she just done here with these by doing this? It's a repeat and enlarge. So she's identifying what she means by, in the initial one, of civil liberty and religious liberty. So civil liberty can be described in two ways: self-government and republicanism. Religious liberty can be described as freedom of religion and Protestantism. Do you see that? So it's just two repeat and enlarges that she does there. And what's neat about this is it answers a question for us. So what's another way of saying religious liberty or freedom of religion? How do we often say that?
separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state. So when we say separation of church and state, we mean that the state shouldn't endorse a religion and shouldn't bring religion into the state. But what has Sister White just said here? Said here in this paragraph. What did she say the two principles of the United States success, power and prosperity were? Republicanism and Protestantism. What's the problem with that? One of them is Protestantism. The secret of the United States success is Protestantism. Isn't that a problem? We have the problem of saying that the United States power is that it's a religious entity. You see the problem with that? So how do we answer that question? Because we know we need the separation of church and state, but at the same time, Sister White seems to be endorsing Protestantism here.
The separation of church and state is Protestant.
Explain that. What do you mean?
Protestantism, the name Protestant comes from protesting Rome, and what Rome did in Europe in the Dark Ages which was the lack of separation of church and state. So if you enact the separation of church and state, you have incorporated Protestantism into your government, your governments.
Oh, so we can answer this question two ways. One way is where Paul's going, and we'll hold that one. We'll put a pin in that one just for a moment. How would we do it from the passage? Show what it means. What?
You would just use the other two.
The other repeat and enlarges.
The other
So,
two definitions.
The other two definitions. So she gives us these as the primary one. Civil liberty and religious liberty. And so if you want to know the definition of any one of these, you look at the other two. So if we want to know what Protestantism means, according to what Sister White is saying in the paragraph, we would say, look at the other two definitions. Protestantism equals freedom of religion and religious liberty. It doesn't mean to be Protestant, to be a Protestant like denomination.
It's not representing a church.
It doesn't represent church. It represents to want the freedom of religion, to have the freedom of religion or religious liberty. Do we see that? Does that make sense? So there's another way we can do it. So that's one way. You can use the passage itself, and you can identify it with these repeat and enlarges. And the other way is what Brother Paul's doing. What is the origin of Protestantism? Reformation. I need very specific details about where the name Protestantism comes from. What do the princes do? Where are they?
They protest the Diet of Spires.
The Diet of Spires. What are they protesting? Who are they protesting? The church. So who did we say is protesting? No, who's protesting? Who's the protesters? The civil, the princes. A bunch of princes come together, and princes are the civil power, and they come to the Diet of Spires, again, not religious, because they're princes, they're not like clergymen, and these princes come, these civil power, civil representatives come to the church, come to the Diet of Spires, and they say, We're not doing this anymore. You've been dictating to us what we should be doing, and we don't think it's right. You've been destroying the German people is really what they were, arguing. And what they've said is that we're not going to allow this to happen anymore, and we're going to keep the church separate from the state. We are the princes. You are the church. Stop telling us what to do. You don't have that authority over us anymore. So they protest that relationship that the Catholic Church wanted of church and state combining. So Protestantism in this definition is born out of, or the Protestantism in general was never a religious thing. It was always a civil thing. The idea of keeping the civil power separate from the religious power. Do you see that? And so the original definition of Protestantism, whether you look at it from the repeat and enlarges here, from that perspective, or if you do it from the historical standpoint, you come to the same conclusion that it's not talking about the religion of Protestantism. It's talking about the idea of protesting Rome. Protesting, and something very specific about Rome, the combination of church and state together. And so that's what Protestantism is. And as we said before, republicanism equals self-governance and civil liberty. That one's an easier one to see. Okay. Any questions about that? Are we all okay with that? Okay. So I want to read a quote, another quote. This is from Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, June 13th, 1899. So, Advent, no, what's this? Actually, I want to do that. Give me 1 second. Yes, I want to do that. Okay. Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, June 13, 1899. June 13, 1899. It says page 376. So, okay, so this is A.T. Jones. And we're going to talk about this in a moment. I asked you guys before, I said, before the last presentation, I mentioned that if you could pull up on your devices the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk about that here in a minute, so just start doing that if you can. But I'm going to read this quotation first. Thus, the two great principles of the Declaration of Independence and of the Constitution, the fundamental principles of the government of the United States. Firstly, all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights. And the second one, governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed, are the very principles of the truth and the government of God. This nation, listen to this, this nation was planted by the Lord to enlighten the world with these mighty truths. For this nation to apostatize from these principles is to directly separate from God who planted the nation. So from A.T. Jones' perspective, who's the person who planted this seed? This is God. He's saying God planted this seed here. It's God's work that he's doing. And he's also using the agricultural model by saying that. He's talking about the planting of the seed, just like Sister White is talking about as well, the coming up out of the ground of the seed. So both are touching on the agricultural model. And he's saying that there's certain principles found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that are the secret of its strength. And before we read the Declaration of Independence, I want to just mention one more thing. So A.T. Jones identifies the fact that from his perspective, why did the Lord place the United States in the world in its time? What was the reason? Amen. But what does he say specifically? Do you remember? Anyone remember? He says, this nation was planted by the Lord to enlighten the world with these mighty principles. And Sister White says a similar thing in the quotation we read. So the United States comes into existence to enlighten the world. If you're going to be enlightened, what does that mean? You're in darkness. It means if you're going to receive light, it means you were in darkness. And where's the darkness? It's here in the fallow. This is the darkness. If we look at the other models, we can mark it this way, darkness. So the fallow field or darkness is here in the fallow field. And so this darkness is here, and the United States gets planted to enlighten the world upon the certain principles. And what could we summarize those principles as in one word? Freedom. It's freedom. So you have captivity, and they need to be enlightened from their darkness, and freedom will be the result of that enlightening. And so what its job was to give freedom, the ideas and principles of freedom, to the rest of the world. Now, who else was supposed to do a similar work to enlighten the world? The Millerites or Israel, either one, we can say either or, and either one works in this example. So we'll use Israel though. So Israel was planted in the world to enlighten the entire world. But what happened to Israel? Did they succeed in that mission? They failed. Why did they fail?
They didn't understand prophecy.
They didn't understand prophecy. They went against the first principles that they had. They used their specialness as a means to put up a wall instead of to enlighten other people. You know, they had a lot of different aspects or variables, I guess you could say, in that. But what they do is, all in all, is they're going to fail in their mission to some degree. Maybe there's some success. You could mark some success in there, but for the most part, it's a failure. And the United States. So, what is Israel? In what way is Israel supposed to be enlightening the world? In what kind of way? By example, for sure, but what kind of principles are they going to give to the world? Were they supposed to give to the world? Israel? They were going to give religious truths, Israel. Israel was giving religious truths. What is the United States giving?
Freedom.
So what kind of freedom?
Religious freedom.
Religious freedom and civil freedom, but what is all of that born out of, I guess? It's a civil question. The United States is a civil government, and it answers civil questions. So religious liberty, the reason you have religious liberty is because you have civil liberty. They go hand in hand together. You can't really have one without the other. Because if you don't have religious liberty, but you have civil liberty, you don't actually have civil liberty because you're being forced to do something, to worship or whatnot. So they go hand in hand. So the United States is going to give to the world a civil example. Now, let's take Israel, ancient Israel. They're the type. Who's the antitype? At the end of the world, who's supposed to be giving the truth? I mean, we'll say in this history, from 1798, who would be giving the truth? Spiritual Israel, or what movement? The Seventh-day Adventist Church, but before they become Seventh, the Millerites. So the Millerites, who are then going to develop into Seventh-day Adventism. So the United States and Adventism at the same time are both going to have a message for the world. One of them is supposed to be enlightening the world in a religious aspect, and one of them is supposed to be enlightening the world in a civil aspect. And are they either of them going to succeed? Depends how you look at it, I guess. Because in one way, if we see ourselves as Adventism because we are Adventist, and you look at the 144,000 as Adventists because they will be or they are, then yes, it's successful at least in some degree in that way. But as a whole, a lot gets removed from Adventism. All the chaff gets removed, which is most of it, I guess. So the United States is giving a civil truth. Adventism is giving, or Millerite/Adventism is giving a religious truth to the world. And both of them are going to have problems. And we'll talk about those problems now. Let's just mention it for a moment. So how many of us are familiar with Sister Tessa's presentation on Acts 27? Yes, yes, okay. So I'm going to ask you to tell me what Sister Tess is talking about, if you can just give me a little bit of information. So tell me about Acts 27. What's the gist of Acts 27?
The story of the two ships.
Story of two ships. What are the two ships? What's their names?
United States and
Adraminium.
The ship of Adraminium, the Adraminian ship, and the Alexandrian ship. And what's the difference between the two ships?
one is abide in death.
One is a good ship and one is a bad ship. The bad ship says, I will abide in death. So they're making a covenant with death, really. And what is the good ship? The Alexandria. Why is it a good ship? It protects the people and it carries the wheat. So what is the difference between the two lines in application? Someone explain that to me. How do you apply the line of the Adraminium? What does that look like? Where, when, what does it look like? And goes to where?
Something like
The Sunday line. What does it show? Of the institutions. The United States and the Seventh Adventist Church both are typified, or both are symbolized, rather, in the ship in both ships, actually. So one ship is showing a decline, and what is the other ship showing?
It's showing that the start where it started good. And then
So it starts good, and does the ship, what is the
it
ship?
goes off course.
It goes off course, but what is the ship goes off course, but what is its integrity?
it's a good ship.
It's a good ship. How long does the ship last?
So Sunday long.
Does it make it through the storm?
Yes.
Yes, it makes it through the storm. It gets all the way to the point of shipwreck. It makes it all the way to the beach, I guess you can say it that way, to the island, and they are able to live. It does its work. So in one instance, you have the ship of Adraminium, and that ship is showing you a decline. It's showing you the negative. It's showing you the negative perspective. But you have the other ship, the Alexandria, which is showing you the positive perspective. It's a good ship that makes it from the beginning of its history all the way to the end of its history.
Does its job.
It does its job. So from that perspective, looking at these two ships, you can see that. How do we differentiate between the good part and the bad part? What is the good part and what is the bad part of the two? So what is the ship of Adraminium? What is the application of that today? What is it showing?
The principles in the United States of separation of church and state are basically dead.
Okay.
It's going to stay that way. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse.
Okay.
And in the Adventist Church, we've gone into a Laodicean condition, and we want to stay that way.
Okay.
They were given a glimpse of what's happening, and they made a decision against the help.
Okay.
Because Felix and Festus, Felix had the first angel's message, and he actually saw what his condition was and decided
He feared.
that's fine.
Yeah, his response, he did fear. He understood the condition, and he still chose to remain dead. So he was dead to begin with, but he chose not to.
Just to abide in his death.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what does that look like at the end of the world, though? How do we apply that? So we have our story. What does that look like in application? Anyone?
It was the SDA Church and the United States. They had these events that were showing them that things aren't okay and things are falling apart, but they chose to stay on that course.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really only God keeping it at bay till people were.
So how do you marry that up with the ship of Alexandria?
One is going down while the other's no. But it's showing the decline of one institution and the rise of another institution.
What is the decline of one institution?
The decline of the United States, or the decline of Adventists,
And the rise of
and
what?
The rise of the decline of the rise of the movement, and the
Okay.
rise of the seventh head.
Okay. All right. Are we all okay with that? All right. So what I want us to see here is that the United States, in one aspect, if we look at the two ships, the United States it's declining. It depends. Again, it depends how you look at the United States. Are you going to look at it as a republic or an empire? In its time as a republic, which is the history from 1798 to Sunday law, it's in decline. It starts off good, starts off good and it's just ends bad. It just comes to a complete end. And like we were saying before, this is the point of imperialism or the empire, the end of the Roman Republic, the beginning of the empire. And so it's showing the decline of that. It's showing the decline of that institution of the United States of America. So let me ask you this question. Are we okay with that? I'm just generically taking that. Or not generically, but all I'm taking is the idea that the United States is declining in that aspect. And it's not depicting anything good. You're abiding in death. Whatever's going on here is bad with that institution. And so that's one aspect of that. So this aspect we're talking about here with the agricultural model, though, it's showing a different picture. Now, if I have a seed, who did we say is the planter here? Who planted the seed here? God. That's what Sister White and A.T. Jones were both saying. There was the problem of darkness, and God's going to introduce the solution of freedom, or of the light, I guess you could say it that way, at a civil level. This is at sort of a national level. And so as one, in this aspect, God is having a work be done through the United States. And let me ask you this question. Is the seed good? Did God plant a good seed or a bad seed? Okay. So if it's a good seed, is it going to grow up to be a bad plant or a good plant? If all the DNA is in the plant, it grows up to be something good, right? So we have a seed, we have a tree here. I'm just going to make it a tree. Whatever plant we want to make it. We have a, sorry. It's a bad tree. We have a tree, and it has this little fruit on it. And is this a good fruit or bad fruit? It's a good fruit. Why is it a good fruit? Why are we saying it's a good fruit? It's a good tree. Good trees produce good fruits. Bad trees produce bad fruits. If God planted a seed, then that seed's going to do what it's supposed to do, and it's going to have a particular effect. And we'll come back to that thought in a bit. So we have a good seed, good tree, good plowing. Did God do an imperfect or a perfect plowing work? Everything God does is perfect. So if he's going to plow, if he's going to put his hand to the plow, it's going to be nothing less than perfection. And if he's going to plant a seed, it's going to be nothing less than perfect as well. And if he's going to water that seed and tender it, nurture it till it comes to a tree and it bears fruit, then you should expect that fruit will be positive, correct? Okay. How do we marry up the ship of Adraminium showing that the United States is going into decline all the way till its end, and this line that shows you that the fruit here is positive, is a good fruit?
There's going to be people that will choose all along the way. There's people that don't choose.
Say that again?
No, that's probably not. I think there's more to it than that. So, but
You might be on
all
the...
along the way, people are allowed to choose.
Okay, people are allowed to choose.
So he planted with the United States being that seed and what all the principles that he planted in there. But along the way, we still get to choose.
Let me ask a question. What was our theme? Freedom. So our theme, I'll put it up here, theme equals freedom. So the thread that we should be weaving through all of our points here is the thread of freedom. So my question is, are you looking that way because you can't read it because it's so small, or are you looking that way because you're confused?
I look that way because I'm reading it.
And it's small?
It's not that. It's
okay.
I have bad eyes.
Okay. So I didn't know if you were confused.
No, I'm not confused. I'm getting it.
Okay. I'm just making sure. So our theme is freedom, so we should be seeing freedom at all these points. So the question is, if we take it from our thematic perspective, how is freedom going to be how is freedom going to be fully nurtured and developed by the time you come to the Sunday law? Isn't that a little bit of an oxymoron? Because we're going to say the freedom that you should expect, the freedom, we're saying that this is the point of when the principles of freedom are at their best, because you have the fruit, they're at their full maturity, but at the same time, you have the Sunday law, right? You see the contradiction there?
Yeah.
And you see the ship of Adramanium showing us that this is just a decline, my sister? What's your solution?
The principles are expressed by the people.
Okay.
So while you have a majority that are gonna be against freedom, gonna try to destroy it, there are some that are gonna see what's happening and they're gonna uphold those principles.
Okay.
That are right.
How does everyone feel about that? Does anyone want to say anything different or add to that? You disagree? Agree? So she's saying that the principles of freedom are going to be espoused by people on the line. So here, there's always going to be a point where people espouse those ideas. And so even at the Sunday law, there's going to be people who espouse the ideas of freedom, and they'll exemplify that.
They basically carry what little torch light there's left because it has to make it through.
So
According to what we know from the.
let me ask you this question. Is it whatever torch light is left, or is it the brightest torch?
The brightest. It would be the brightest.
Just because it's a
Yeah.
development of truth.
Right.
This is the little torch light would be back here.
Because they
the
didn't
full
know how
torch-
powerful what they had really was until it gets to where it's shown.
They
Yeah.
thought they had a fire and they had a flashlight.
Yeah.
So the little bit would be here, but the full development is here. Does everyone see what she's saying? Anyone confused by that? You're not seeing what she's saying? So she's saying that at this point here, so the problem I'm raising is that there's a contradiction. I'm saying that at the Sunday law, the principles of freedom in the United States will be at their strongest, will be the best that they've ever been. But how can that be when you're at the Sunday law, which is the point to where when the United States dies and it's speaking like a dragon and it's making an image of the beast? And our sister's answer was that the principles are going to be espoused by people. So you have a group of people standing here at the Sunday law who are going to say, I believe in this, whatever freedom. I believe in freedom in a certain way. And they're going to, as she says, they're going to carry that torch. The torch of freedom that was here, here, and here will again be carried by a group of people. Are we okay with that? Okay. Yes, sister?
Well, the other thought is that freedom is freedom to do even stupid things, like pass Sunday laws.
Okay.
And it's at the height. Just because freedom is good for some people and freedom for some other people, they use it and wrest it. But in order to,
But you can't use your freedoms to do what you want to stop other people's freedoms.
I mean, at the Sunday law, those people were free to choose to pass the Sunday law. From then on, there really isn't any freedom.
Some of them aren't going to see the torch as bright as they need to see it until they see. the
It'll be
light
black
going
and
out.
white
No,
right then,
no
is
way.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah,
be
and
black
then
and white.
It will be.
Okay. So you're saying, what do you mean black? You mean the comparison between the two?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the Sunday law? What time of day? It's midnight. Are we okay with that? Is everyone familiar with that? If you bring the Millerite line here, Sunday law equals July 21st, which is midnight in the parable of the 10 virgins, excuse me. So this is midnight. Now, at midnight, during the day, what can't you see?
Right.
You can't see stars. When do you see stars? At night. When are they at their brightest? At midnight. At the darkest point of night, you have the brightest light. So that torch she's talking about, the torch where she said, whatever remains of this torch. And what I said to her is, I said, the torch will be brighter here than it was here. Even, as bright as we think the Declaration of Independence was, or the Constitution in this history, it's going to be even brighter when you come to the point of the Sunday law because of the comparing, contrasting of the two. The darkness only exemplifies, only enlightens or contrasts the stars even more. The darker it gets, the brighter they get. The more light you have. Yep. Was that a hand? Oh, sorry, I thought it was a hand. You're juxtaposing the two, the darkness and the light. So at the point of the deepest darkness, you have the greatest light of freedom. And I believe that she's saying that at each one of these points, there's a group of people who are espousing the ideas set forth at that time. And it's here that the principles of freedom, the principles laid out in the Declaration of Independence, will be fully realized. They may not ever bear sway again at the national level like they used to, but they will be so well defined and so well understood or seen that it will be even brighter than it was in the past. You okay with that? That makes sense? And this is the people who do this. What's the group of people who do this? What's their name? What? No, not the Sunday level. That would carry the light. This is the 144,000. So what else are the 144,000 carrying? What other light? So they're going to have the light of freedom, but what other light are they carrying? Truth. What kind of truth? Bible truth, prophetic truth. So the 144,000 are going to have a perfect conception, perfect for the moment, for the crisis. They're going to have a perfect conception of not only the civil aspect of things, which is the Declaration of Independence, but they're also going to have a perfect understanding of the religious aspect, which is the prophetic message. And those two are going to blend. Obviously, we know they're blending. And they're going to be able to give this perfect message here, whatever it looks like in that moment, in contrast with the darkest point, which is the Sunday law, which is that midnight point. So you can, at one level, you can show that this is all just a failure, that everything went bad. The ship just was a mess. But at another level, you can show that there's something good that comes out of this history, and it's the ideas of freedom that get espoused by the people here, the 144,000. Amen? Okay. So let's look at the Declaration of Independence for a little bit. Everyone have one? Have you pulled it up? Okay. So it'd be good if you can have it. So if you can have it, because I'm gonna keep reading it. I'm gonna come back to it. I'm gonna reference it for a little bit. So what is the Declaration of Independence? Well said, my sister. The Declaration of Independence is a declaration of independence. It's not just a declaration, it's a declaration of independence. Well said.
Define yourself.
She's mastered the obvious. I'm just kidding, I'm messing with it.
And the copy I pulled up says it's the unanimous declaration.
You didn't have that. You didn't have unanimous. Thank you, my sister. To put you in your place. So, no, really, what is...
Oh,
It's right there. What is not, that not is, not, what is it? What is it, though?
The proclamation.
I don't mean is it a declaration, is a proclamation. I mean, what is it doing? What is it saying?
Well, what it's saying.
We're not going to go along separating.
We are no longer listening to you.
We're no longer listening to you. So what is, who aren't they listening to? Britain. They're not listening to Great Britain. They're not listening to Great Britain anymore. Why aren't they listening to Great Britain?
A lot of reasons.
Lots of reasons. In the Declaration of Independence, there's a list of reasons. In the middle, there's a nice list of long list of grievances is what it's called, the list of grievances. So the Declaration of Independence, if I can put it in a sort of not a trivial way, but a silly way, it's a breakup letter, is what it is.
Dear George. Bye.
Dear King George.
See ya.
It's a breakup letter, and that is going to end a relationship. I say it that way purposely. I know it's a divorce. They're divorcing each other. So what is the? So you have. So let's do that. Let's read it first before we go there. So let's just start reading this, and we'll make some comments. So this is really well written, obviously. You'll also find that. Never mind, we'll talk about that in a minute. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal stance to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. I do this every time. When I read this sentence, it's one sentence. You expect there to be a break, but it's just one sentence. There's no end to it. So let me go back to the beginning. It's, yeah, if you, the rest, the middle portion where it says we hold these truths, that's 2 sentences. That paragraph is 2 sentences. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. What does that mean? It's a breakup. It's saying we've been connected. It's saying we've been connected through our political bands, and it's become necessary for us to dissolve those ties. And to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station. What does that mean? In conjunction with that first part. So if I told you that I'm going to assume among the powers of the earth my separate and equal station, what must have I been before?
One of the other stations.
Say it the right way. Say it the way it should be, the way you would write it. Juxtapose it. So if I say, tell me the opposite. I say I'm going to assume among the powers of earth the separate. What would be the opposite of that? The connected. And equal station. What would that be? Unequal or subservient. Unequal or subservient. So it's saying, so if I'm declaring to you that I'm going to be separate and equal, that means I must have been together and unequal. Do you see that? So they're telling you what their position was. And to assume the station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So they're saying, we have to tell you all this because we have to be polite. It's respectful for us to tell you why we're ending this relationship. So what did they just do in that first sentence, though? Or the first, it's all one sentence, but who did they invoke? God. Nature, they said the laws of nature and of nature's God. So what's the problem with that? So we have, they're talking about the church. So do you see, so let's count how often we see the church come in, or not church, but how often we see God or the Creator come into this. So that's the first time we see it. We see the laws of nature and of nature's God. So let's continue. We hold these truths to be self-evident. What truths are they holding to be self-evident? What they're about to say. They haven't said it yet. We hold these truths, the ones they're about to say, to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator. So we have Creator again. We've just invoked the Creator. So they said the nature's God, and now we have Creator. So that's 2 points. By their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such a way as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So let's go back through that. We hold these truths to be self, that all men are created equal, that they are. So what if I say you're created equal? What's the problem with that? What am I? I'm created. I'm acknowledging creation, that there's some sort of created work here. So we have nature's God, created people, and a creator. Do we see those?
If you think about it, though, it's not a problem, because if you understand the most simple basic principle of the Bible is that God allows free choice. So,
What do you mean? What?
as in,
Explain that a little bit for us.
You can't force your religion on it in this context.
And would I not be forcing it on all the people who, in the United States, who are under the Declaration of Independence?
No.
Why? Because I mean, the principle that they're.
You're using the principle of God for freedom to choose whatever you want. God can't accept forced religion. That's not a religion of the heart.
But why does this have anything to do with God? I'm sending King George my breakup letter. Why do I have to talk about God?
Because King George.
What?
That's how he thinks. That's what he understands.
What, King George?
Yeah.
So you're saying they're writing it in the language that King George will accept?
Yeah, because King George thinks he rules by divine right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's telling them, no, that's not how God operates. He doesn't operate with what you're doing to people. That's not correct.
Okay, so he's using the language that King George is familiar with. Is that what people are saying?
I wonder about that because I was thinking that because a lot of the people who wrote this, there are several were atheists or Masons or deists, whatever. So for them to invoke gods, I always thought it was kind of strange sometimes. You know, like George Washington, people like that. There were Christians among them. There were those among them that this would have been language you would expect from them, but not from some of the key people. So I
Okay.
wonder about that.
Okay, so we have a question mark about that. Could be the fact that they are trying to write it in the language that would be receptive to the English Parliament, because they're going to write it to them.
I think they're also pointing out that they're acting in a contradictory way.
To God.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're suppressing people and they come out of that. And from what I can read and what I've read of people back in the day, they seem to have been much smarter than us, if I can to say that, but me especially, as far as, very educated. Like that quote where in the principles we see the consequences and all that. Like I didn't even know what a principle but they saw this and they could see that you're in contradiction to your own faith. Your own faith doesn't even sustain what you're doing.
Okay.
So I don't know.
All right. So what are the two main documents of the United States? Okay. So what are the two? Let's get some unanimous consent here.
Independence of the Constitution.
Say again?
The Declaration of Independence of the Constitution.
Declaration of Independence and
Because
the
the Bill of
Constitution.
Rights is part of the Constitution.
Yeah.
So Declaration of Independence, I'm just going to put DOI. 1776. Constitution. I'm just going to, I'll do that one now. Anyone know? Constitution? 17. Test question?
89.
89. 1789. So we said that so I don't know how many of us has read the Constitution. You're Americans, you should have. All people should read the Constitution. But anyway, so the Constitution, how many times is the creator, the created, nature's God elaborated in the Constitution? 0 times. How much God is there? There's no God in the Constitution. What is the only mention of anything religious? Anyone know?
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of religion, the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, basically. The establishment clause is what it's called. So, Constitution, there's no God.
It's a civil right.
So we have no God here. In the Declaration of Independence, we've already read that there's God present. You see that? So we have God in this document, but no God in this document. How do we marry those up?
Well,
Civil and
it's
religious.
the Ten Commandments, right?
What do you mean? Oh, you're saying 5, the 4 and 6.
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
But prove it.
I'm not going to. I'll get back to you.
Get back to you on that one. That's an interesting thought.
It seems to me that's their two tables. It's kind of conspicuous that they.
That's neat. I never thought about it that way.
So the Declaration of Independence is then, I guess, that would be what they're saying is religious freedom. We're announcing our religious freedom and separating from you so we can have that. And then the Constitution is, these are our civil rights that no one's ever allowed to touch. So it's like the state and the church.
So you're saying one is claiming.
When we protest against this combination that you have, we don't want it anymore.
Mhm.
And the other one is Republican ideals.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? How do we marry those two up? God and no God. These are your documents, guys.
What do you mean by marry them?
I mean, how can I have one document that says God and then one document that says no God? This one says no establishment of religion or any God. There's literally nothing to do with God or anything in this one, but there is in this one.
I can get you the floor for the person who signed that July 4th. So
I'm okay. I'm okay with you saying that this is this and this is that. I think you're right, probably. That there's now that You said it. It seems like there's something there. But I need us to explain why you can do this, why they aren't contradicting each other, or are they?
They don't, because one of them addresses our relationship to governance as far as religious governance, and the other one addresses how we treat everybody else. Like the 4 commandments.
Okay.
The first 4 address our relationship to God, and the last 6 to each other.
Okay.
Something else I'm saying is this was a breakup letter with England, so it was sent to them, but the Constitution was to establish the laws of this land.
Say that again, sorry.
The Declaration of Independence was to tell Great Britain, it was a letter addressed to them saying, we're separating, here's why. And then the Constitution was, okay, now let's organize this country, and here are our laws. And we don't want a mixture of church and state, so no God is going to go in any of this, because we need it to be separate, because look what we just had to come out of.
Okay.
That's
All right. No, that's fine. So let's, before we answer that, before we come back to that, let's keep that there for a minute. Going back to it, says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, which rights? The unalienable rights. So to secure your unalienable rights, what are unalienable rights?
They're the ones that go away.
Okay, freedom, I can't say.
Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
So it's the rights I can't give away. That's what unalienable means.
You can't take
And
them.
you
Can't take them away.
and you can't take
Nobody
them
can
away.
take them away. And
You
what?
can't give them-
And you can't give them away. Why can't you give them away, my sister?
Well, I think that's like it's God-given.
Do you think it? How do you come to that conclusion? You're right. Read the document. It gave you the answer. I mean, it says that. It says that they are endowed. They are given. That they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. So among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's more, though they're a nice umbrella. So the question is, we said an unalienable right is a right that I can neither give you nor you can take from me. It goes both ways. And the reason my sister is saying I can't give them to you and you can't take them from me, but more specifically why I couldn't give them to you, is because they're not mine to give. They're God's rights. They're God's rights that he's given to me, and I can't give that right away because it's not mine, it's not my property. So continuing, that to secure these rights, the unalienable rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. So what is the right, what is the work of government supposed to be? What does that say?
Guarantee your rights.
To guarantee your rights, to protect your unalienable rights. And where do they get their power from? The people. It says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power, their good power. It's not bad power, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. I have to give you the right to govern me. Do you see that? There's consent. So we have a couple things on the table here. So let's try to mix these together a little bit. So we have the idea of God versus no God. We have the question of unalienable rights. And we have the question of how the government gets its how they're justified to do their to govern. You know, where they get their power from, which we said is from the people. Let me ask one more question. And this is backing up a little bit. This might seem a little bit disconnected, but it's there. So, what is the? We'll answer all of the questions. What is the justification to separate from Great Britain? Sorry, let me say it this way, not the justification. How do they have the right to break away from Great Britain? Okay, so they think they have unalienable rights.
Because their freedoms are being denied.
But why are your freedoms? So what? I'm Great Britain, and I say I don't care if I deny your rights, your perceived rights that you think you have. I'm stronger than you. You know, you're my servant. That's just the way it is.
They were oppressed, and then they got to the point where they said, we need to rise above this oppression, so we need to declare what we want as people or as a nation. So we sent this declaration. Okay, we don't like the way you're treating us, so we're going to separate from you. This is what we're becoming.
Well, what's their justification for doing so? They need a reason. They need to say, I have, the Declaration of Independence is not only just declaring that they are leaving, but it's telling them, this is my justification for leaving. This is why I have the right to leave you and to not be oppressed by you anymore. And Great Britain's going to say, one second, Great Britain's going to say to them, you don't have that right. You don't have the right to leave me because I'm stronger than you and I tell you what you can do. But they need a justification. What's their justification, my sister?
It says God entitled them to separation.
So,
Is that what it says?
their justification.
Station towards the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them. The separate. Yeah.
So,
This is how they separate.
They were being treated unequally. God defended them.
And God is stronger than the UK, so it doesn't matter how strong Great Britain is.
so who are they appealing to in their justification? God. So they're not appealing to man. They're not saying it's because we just don't feel like being oppressed anymore. They're not saying it's, we don't really have a right to leave, because, it's natural selection and the strongest prevails. They're saying we have a right, no matter what you do, Great Britain, we have a right to certain things. And you're trampling on those certain things. And the person who gave us those rights is God. So their appeal to be able to separate from Great Britain, their main appeal is God. What if they didn't have God? What's the problem then? They have no right to separate. The only right that they would have to separate is just if they're stronger than Great Britain. It would just be whoever has the biggest stick in the room gets to decide who has what rights, and gets to decide who can leave and who can stay. But they're saying there's something outside of you, Great Britain. There's God, and He's done something. He's given us rights, and you're trampling on those rights, and we're justified in leaving. We see that? They're appealing to God. They're going higher than the Great Britain. And so what are they telling Great Britain? Who's over Great Britain?
God.
Who's over Great Britain? No, I don't mean over the country of Great Britain. I mean over, let me say it this way. How do I say that? So they're appealing to God, right? So God is their ultimate authority here. God's on top. And who's appealing to God?
The people.
The people. And what did the people say in the second sentence or the first sentence? What did they say about government? What's government's role? Where does government get their power from? From the people. So the government's below people. So we'll put state here. So the hierarchy goes like this. It goes God, then the people, then the state. And what comes from God?
Freedom.
The rights. Which rights? Unalienable rights. So from God, these unalienable rights, I'm just going to put UA, unalienable rights, flow to the people. And what is the government's job in regards to those rights? To protect them. So the state, the people, what do they do in order to protect their rights? They establish government. It's like it's all of us coming together. So let's say we're all separate right now. Now, the problem if we're all separate is we don't necessarily agree. So this corner of the room can say we're just going to start beating up everyone over here because they feel like it or they want to. And this side of the room over here, they're going to do something else. And this side of the room over here is going to do something else. And everyone's rights get trampled on in the process of everyone trying to do something. So what do we do in order to stop that? We institute a government. We say, okay, guys, we're all coming together. And the reason we're coming together is because we all want our rights to be protected. We all want to, we want these unalienable rights to be secured. And the best way to do that is this, if we all enter into a civil agreement where we say we're all going to respect each other. We see that? So they make an agreement that will establish government to protect us, to protect our rights. So the Declaration of Independence establishes this hierarchy. It goes God, people, and the state. What relationship is the Declaration of Independence really dealing with? What level of this?
The relationship with people with God.
The relationship between the people and God. So the Declaration is here. The DOI, Declaration of Independence, is here. It's at this level. It's talking about the relationship between God and people. What does the Constitution talk about? Between people and the state. Why can't there be God in the Constitution? Because the Constitution is below. It has nothing to do with God because it's looking at this relationship, the relationship between people and the state. If it was going to deal with the relationship between God and the people, then it would be able to talk about it. But because it's only dealing with the relationship between people and the state, it has to stay within the bounds of that. And God doesn't exist. God's above all of that. It enters it nowhere in this box. This is the box of the Constitution. And that's all it's allowed to talk about because it's dealing with that relationship between the two things. So the reason the Declaration of Independence is allowed to talk about God is because it's dealing with the relationship between God and people. It has to establish the hierarchy of God, people, and the state, because King George, and what is King George a symbol of?
State.
Where is King George? He's in Great Britain. So, this is Florida. We'll just call this Europe. So,
Which one's Scotland?
it's whatever one you want to be, maybe France. Let's say this is USA. How was the USA established? Why was it established? It says in the paragraph we read, they were fleeing what? They're refusing persecution, civil and religious. So the pilgrims, they run across to the United States. They leave. And they flee, and they're like, oh, we're safe over here. What's the problem, though? What are they still, though? They're still connected.
Yeah, but they also
They're in the bands.
They're the bands?
The bands of, what is it, political bands.
They still have the political bands that connect them. That's what it says. It says, when in the course of human, it becomes necessary for one people, the United States, or what's going to be the United States, to dissolve the political bands that connect them to Europe. So what is Europe?
The chain master.
They're the chain master. We'll mention that in a minute. But what is this in the Kingdoms of Bible Prophecy? What is Europe?
The fifth.
It's the fifth. This is the fifth kingdom. What is the United States? The sixth kingdom. What's the problem with what?
I just want to read one comment.
Yep.
Brother Victor saying that they, Britain, believed based on the Bible that God sets up kings and rulers and removes them. They both read the Bible, but in a different way.
Amen. That's something, if we had enough time to do it this weekend, we don't, because we only have one more after this. If we had enough time, we would find that the reading of the Declaration of Independence, the reading of the Constitution, the reading of a couple other things, all play into the idea, let me say it this way. The question of how you read is as much an American problem, and a civil American problem, as it is a religious problem. It's always been a problem because you and I, not you and I, but Trump and I don't read the Constitution the same way. We don't read the Declaration of Independence the same way. We come to different conclusions about what's allowed. So the question of how you read, and they're gonna be justifying. The United States is going to justify their position by saying God set this hierarchy up. And what is Great Britain going to do? What did they just say? They're going to use God to say, God sets up kings and sets them down. I have divine right to rule. And so both of them are going to use God to validate their position. When you come to the Sunday law, the waymark of the Sunday law, what are the two options? We're doing it for God. And the other side saying, we're doing it for God. Both of them are going to use God as their justification. When you come to slavery, both of them are going to use the justification of God. One is going to say God wants freedom for everyone, and the other is going to say Abraham had slaves. God wants us to, have order and all that. Yep.
That's perfect freedom if you think about it.
What is?
You get to read it however. That's following the dictates of your own conscience. Some people's consciences are seared, so they see it a certain way. But that's perfect freedom. God gives everybody the right to see it however they want to see it.
Mm-hmm. So the question of how you read is intricately a constitutional problem as much as it is a prophetic problem. And what were we talking about before that?
Fifth and sixth kingdom.
The fifth and sixth kingdom, thank you. So we have the fifth kingdom of Bible prophecy and the sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy of the United States. And what did we say the problem, my sister? What's the problem?
The political bans.
The political bans.
It's kind of like a political slavery.
So let me say it a different way. Instead of bans, I'm going to say a political chain. There's this chain that goes all the way across the Atlantic, really long train. It took a lot of people to make it. This chain comes all the way from Great Britain, or all the way from Europe to the United States. What did the United States, the United States is raised up to get away from this system. But Europe just can't let go. They can't, even though they're geographically separated, they're politically connected still. What does the Declaration of Independence do? It cuts the chain. It cuts it right in half. It ends the relationship. Now, what did we say the fifth kingdom was? In Revelation 13, what's the fifth kingdom? It's the papacy. What do we call it in Revelation 13, though? It's not the fifth, it's the first. It's the first beast. This is the first beast, and this is the second beast. We said this is the problem beast, this is the solution beast. So, is there any solution while this chain is connected? It's still connected. So, if they don't disconnect, yeah, they have to cut those bands, the tie that connects them. So we said this was the problem, this was the solution. But you can't have the solution till what? Till you recognize the problem and you cut the bands. So I want to mark the cutting of the bands in the beginning of this reform line as 1776, is the introduction of this message. Now, the Declaration of Independence is as much a message as it is a political statement. Because as a message, it sets this up, which is this hierarchy here. If everyone understood this, the world would be perfect, pretty much. And now there would be many less issues. That's the wrong way of saying that. There'd be far less issues if this was understood. Because what happened is the state tried to take this position or this position. You could say it either way. In certain ways, it was both. But they tried to take the position that they weren't supposed to have. They put themselves above the people instead of the people being above them. So we begin our story here in 1776 with the arrival of a message, with the arrival of the Declaration of Independence, telling us, laying forth the principles of freedom. Remember, our theme is freedom, and the Declaration of Independence is what gave that freedom. It's what began the freedom, I guess you can say it that way. And we'll close there. It's a good place to stop. Any questions so far on that before we close? Okay, let's close. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the Declaration of Independence, for the Constitution, these documents that you've put before us, Lord, that you have allowed man to see the high and holy principles that you wanted for us, Lord, and that you have allowed us to see that and to espouse those things, Lord. And we just pray that you would help us to understand these documents, to understand the principles in the documents, and to rightly interpret whether it be a civil document or a religious document, Lord, to put on the correct lens into our glasses, our prophetic glasses, and just pray that you be with us, that you bless the rest of our meetings, and we ask for your guidance now. In Jesus' name, amen. So, Sister Elaine, are you going to leave after this? Have you figured that out?
Okay, meet up again at 5:15.
Concerned about, I want to be able
Oh, yeah.
to finish.
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna say the word.
And I'm just worried about being too tired for everything.
Okay, I'm only asking because if you're going to leave, then I want to talk. Then we should talk.
Well, we should talk now anyways, because I'm going to be back to the next one.
Okay. Brother Michael and Sister Lisa,
So did we,
can I steal both of you? And Sister Sena?
Do you think you can get your next presentation done in an hour and a half?
Can I get it done? I mean, like, do it go for an hour? Or what do you mean?
No, I have an hour and a half left.
Oh, yeah. Well, I will go as long as you need me.
No. Okay.
Yeah. No,
I
I can.
don't want to change film things.
Oh, no, I can. Yeah, hour and a half is fine. I wasn't going to go more than an hour 15.
Okay, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Want us over in that other room?
No, let's stay in this room.
Yeah, we can just talk over here, I guess.